Welcome to the Queens of Moxie, a podcast all about empowering women to reclaim their moxie, their power. I'm Mary Kay Campbell, and I'm the host of this program. Each week, we'll talk with amazing women who have reclaimed their moxie, overcome challenges, and are living their best life. So let's get started. Welcome back to Queens of Moxie podcast, and I am so delighted to have Shannon here with us today. Now, I always mess up her name. I'm going to try to get it right. It's Shannon Cochran Esquerdo. Did I get it?
You got it.
Yes, that's awesome. Okay. Y'all, I never say her last name because honestly, I'm always afraid I'm going to mess it up. But she is such a dynamo. I met her about a year ago, and it has been a delight to follow her on LinkedIn, to see what she's doing, to learn more about her, and also to just be a friend with her. And so before we get started, I want to give you a little bit of background about her. She has her Bachelor's of Science in Biology Education, and then she got her Master's of Science in Forensic Science. She also has her Executive Certificate in Leadership Coaching and her Project Management Certificate, along with a whole bunch of other things. And I probably got those a little bit wrong, but she is a leadership coach, a motivational speaker. She is an instructional systems designer, a marketing consultant. She was obviously a science educator for a while, and she has her own coaching company called Coaching Courageous. And being courageous is one of the most important values that she has within her organization. She's currently an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, and she is an instructional designer. So if that's not enough to make your head spin, I'm not sure what would be. But Shannon, we are so delighted to have you here with us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you again, and also to talk with your audience. Yeah, this is exciting.
It is. It's so exciting. So one of the things I didn't mention about Shannon is that every year she raises tons and tons of money for St. Baldrick's and shaves her head, which for any woman out there, shaving your head every year rather, is just, it's remarkable. And so we'll get into that a little bit later, but I do want to make sure that I mention her commitment to that. So Shannon, as you know, the Queens of Moxie podcast is really about empowering women. It's helping women to live their authentic lives, to be who they're supposed to be, doing the things that they're supposed to be, going where they're called or where they feel like they're most on fire. And you have had such an interesting journey throughout your career and also personally. And I think that you are such an amazing representative for so many people, and a lot of times people who aren't necessarily represented. And so I'd like to first start with your career aspect of it. You know, how do you go from being a biology teacher to working with the United States intelligence community to being a leadership coach? Like, how does that journey happen?
That is a fantastic question. So when I was teaching, I was in Oklahoma, and I was a science teacher. I was a head volleyball coach, assistant, lots of sports to make extra money, because as a public school teacher, you don't make a lot of money. So, you know, I met my current wife 21 years ago now. And when we met, when we met, I was talking to her about wanting to do something different. And at the time, CSI was really big on TV. And I thought, you know, I'd really love to do something like that, where there's investigations, you know, involved, and you get to solve crimes. And I wonder how I could do that. So, of course, being the amazing person that she is, she did some research, and she said, you know, the school that you got your bachelor's degree from, they have a new forensic science program. I was like, really? So I applied and got in, and the rest, as far as that, is history. So going into the U.S. intelligence community, when I was getting ready to graduate, I did my practicum with the Oklahoma City Police Department. Mm-hmm. And so I was introduced to local law enforcement. Right. And I also went and talked to someone that was part of the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation to see if I might be interested in the state level. And when I was there, he's Native American, amazing forensic artist, Harvey Pratt is his name. And I still remember, this has been a long time ago. And he had such an amazing impact on me. And he just kind of looked at me and I said, "What are you thinking?" And he said, I don't see you at the state level. I see you at the federal level. And I
Oh,
was like, "What?" What do you mean you
wow.
see me? So just the insight and the, I don't know if you call it psychic abilities or if you just call it this sixth sense. I don't know what it
Right.
was, but
Right.
so I thought about that and I applied to be an FBI special agent. And so I got in, and that was a long process. It was about 9 months before I was assigned a class. And then I got hurt and injured, which led me down a completely different path. Making a very long story short, I ended up being a government contractor when I moved out to the DC area with the FBI. And I moved around to a lot of different U.S. intelligence community organizations. There's 18 now, since now that we have the space agency, but before that there were 17. So I've been in several of them supporting.
Yeah.
And it's been an interesting ride. And so in one of those, when I went back to the FBI, was doing a different job as a contractor, I became a relationship manager, and I was working with the private sector with associations in the private sector, like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is one example.
Mhm.
And I was helping to identify different, strategic initiatives, things that we had in common and so forth. And I really, really loved it. And in meeting some of the executives in some of these associations, I thought, I would love to be able to support them in a
Mhm.
different way as well. And in speaking to a friend of mine who was also someone that is still a mentor of mine, she mentioned executive coaching. And I was like, yeah, I've been hearing about that. I think that's what I want to do. And so she said, Georgetown has a program. And my immediate thought was, Georgetown is a Jesuit college. They're not going to want someone like me that's a lesbian to go to their Jesuit college. And that was my first thought. So I drug my heels for about 3 years, kicking and fighting, screaming and going, not going to apply because they're probably going to say no. And so my wife looked at me again, instrumental in kind of nudging me along
Yeah.
and basically calling my bluff, if you will, on things when I say, oh, I'd love to do this. And she's like, are
Do
you even going to apply?
it.
What's the worst they can do? And say no? I'm like, oh, yeah. So we were having one of those conversations and she said just that. And I said, you know what? You're right. So over a weekend, I wrote my essay, filled out my application, did everything I needed to do and submitted it, and found out a few weeks later that I had gotten in. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm on the hook for this. I've got to do
Right.
this. But it was amazing. So that's what led me to leadership coaching.
Mhm.
And it's just been, I think that obstacles fall in our way or get in our way to help guide us where we're actually supposed to be.
Mhm.
And I think there's been a lot of those. Many of us have experienced that along our lives.
Right.
People come into our lives when we're ready for them.
Yes.
You hear about the teachers come into our lives when the student's ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that a lot of that has gone on in my life
Yeah.
as well, which is the
Yeah.
reason you've seen me kind of pivot a
Well,
lot.
and I think as we age, we start to understand ourselves better. We start to understand the world better. And we also, at least for me, and what I found in talking with women through Queens of Moxie is that so often we've put others and other things as a priority. So society says that we're supposed to continue to move up the corporate ladder, that we're supposed to seek the higher title, the greater pay, that all the things that we think are what we want. And, for me, because I do have children, I've poured into my children, I've poured into my career, and I neglected what I knew to be where I really was going to be able to make the greatest impact. And I think a lot of it for me was I kept, hearing a whisper, getting a tap on the shoulder, but I was scared of how do I do this as a single mom? How do I make this a reality? And quite frankly, I had a car accident a year and a half ago, and it forced me to stop. It forced me to essentially have a sabbatical. I like to say I had a brain vacation. my brain literally did not process things quickly. And like, not at all. When I got the first initial test 3 weeks after my car accident, they, do this computerized test. And I ended up with a processing speed of 16%, which is
Wow.
ridiculously low. Like when you look at the bell curve, I'm like an outlier, right? And by the end of that 6-week PT, I was at 64%. And I've continued, that's over a year ago. I've continued to get better, but my brain literally needed to stop and slow down. And I needed to recalibrate, so to speak. And, for me, my goal is I don't want other women to get to the place where they have a traumatic something happen.
Yes.
Divorce, job loss, health issue, car accident, whatever it might be. It took that for me to stop, and reassess things. And my goal is for women not to do that and to make those realizations and to be authentic and honest and true to themselves before those things happen. So, hats off to your wife for really like saying, pushing you,
Yes.
she has continually been that bird in your ear saying, you are good enough. You have value. You are going to kick some butt doing this. And I support you 100% in this journey, and really that brings us to when we first met. You had gotten laid off and you and your wife had decided, okay, you're going to go all in on your coaching and you were ready to go. And then you got this amazing opportunity and you had to really assess, okay, what, wait a minute. I was all set up and ready to go. I knew what I was going to do. And all of a sudden, bam, it's going to change. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I received this phone call out of the blue, and you set it up very nicely. Thank you, by the way. And I love your story. And, I'm so glad that you're doing well and that you're doing what you are, because the impact you're going to have on people is much bigger than you or I or anybody else I think can imagine. So thank you to you as well.
Thank you.
So I think, when I got that phone call, I was fully anticipating saying thank you, but no thank you, if I was even offered the position, because I had a plan. And as I talked to this person that was explaining what this job was, it just seemed to check every box that I had been looking for previously. So had I not been laid off, that opportunity would not have presented itself, because I was with a different company. I wasn't looking for anything else. Right. And so when this came along, it took me a couple of hours before I went and talked to my wife again. And she's like, what are you waiting for? Your face is, the light is on. I mean, your eyes are just, the light is back. And she said, I haven't seen that, in your eyes for a long time. So it's nice to see that. So whatever it is, go call her. And I was like, okay. So I did. And the rest is history. I've been there now about 10 months and I'm loving it. Seems like I've been there a lot longer because I've learned so much in such a short amount of time.
Right.
But it was everything and more than I thought it would be. And I think it will help my business on the outside as well, because of they complement each other very well.
Yeah.
So it's been amazing. So I made the right decision going back. I had already taken money out from the other, so I just used that to pay bills off. And I was like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was listening to the signs.
And I think that's so remarkable, because you have really taken the time to quiet your internal voice and say, to really listen and to follow that. 12 years ago, I think it was, I was at a church retreat, and the keynote speaker was talking about what lights you up, what brings you the greatest joy, what are those things? And I was sitting there and I thought of 3 things. And I thought for one of them, I absolutely could not say it. Like there was no way I was going to say it. I'm like, no. He said, okay, I want you to come up with something that lights you on fire. And I don't want you to discount it. You're going to say in your mind, I'm not going to say that. There's no way. And I want you to say it. And like I said, I came up with 3 things. I thought, I'll say 2 of them, but I'm not saying the third one. And the woman sitting next to me patted my leg and said, okay, Miss Cheerleader, what's your things? My third thing was cheerleading. Honest to God, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I had cheered in high school and college and loved the sport of it. And my three things were writing, inspirational speaking, and cheerleading. But the cheerleading was not about the sport. It was about motivating others and getting them excited and really rallying the troops kind of thing, which is what I try to do with my writing and my inspirational speaking. This was 12 years ago. You know,
Wow.
I have been hearing this. People have been literally telling me I should do this for about 15 years. So my hats are off to you because you listened and you didn't just listen, but you also changed course based on knowing what was true in your core and what you knew to be where you were going to add the greatest value. And I think it's so easy, at least for me, it was so easy to say, no, I can't do that right now. I can't do that right now. You know, so my hats are off to you for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I think to your point, it took me a lot of years to get here. And so when you and I were first talking about doing this podcast, I mean, I was thinking about my age right now. I mean, I earned every one of these silver hairs. And so I wasn't always as bold and as courageous and my authentic self as I am right now. There went my kitty cat.
I know.
This is Skittles again.
Hi, Skittles.
So she's like, don't touch me. So yeah, I mean, it took me a long time to get to the point where I am right now. And I think you bring me to a good point about being authentic. And it was living my truth and really leaning into my own values and being okay if I was let go, if I was moved off of a contract because, you know, it didn't fit with my values and someone said, you know, I had to do something and it went against integrity or a whole slew of things.
Right.
I was okay with that.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, I still have to pay my bills. I'll figure it out, or we will figure it out. But I'll be able to sleep just fine at night because I will know that I had done the right thing.
Right.
And I think it took me a lot of years to get to that point. And that's where I am now.
Yeah. I turned 50 in May. And so I don't think we're too far apart in age. And I don't know if it's turning 50. I don't know if it's the car accident. I don't know if it's the pandemic and saying enough is enough. But I am definitely at a place in my life where I'm like, this is who I am. And I like who I am. And it's okay if you don't like it. It really is. And I think about two different things. So, you know, I talked about how I continue to move up in my career and do all these different things. My degrees are in writing, both of them. And I love to write. I love connecting with people and hearing their stories and telling them in a compelling manner. I love that. It lights me on fire. Strategy, marketing, advertising, the whole integrated marketing approach. It's okay. I don't love it. I don't love budgets. I'm not sure I really like managing people. I mean, I love people, but I want to be your friend. And when you manage, you can't be friends. Like there's this line, you know, but I was doing what I was supposed to do. And it took my accident and turning 50 and all of these different things for me to say, even though that's where I should be going with my career, it's not. I'm moving back into that writing piece of it because that's what I love. And that's where I can be a rock star. I can't be a rock star as a marketing director. And that's a hard realization to come to. It really is like, oh, I'm not good at that. I'm not. And that I'm okay with that. The other component that I have recently realized is there is an amazing, amazing co-working space here that just opened. And I know the executive director and I, you know, toured it multiple times while it was being built. And I went there one day to just work in the space and I was in a common area and I had a Zoom call and I had my earbuds in and they stopped working. So I took them off and I was talking really quietly and I had my volume all the way down. And afterwards he came up to me and said, you know, next time you really need to go into one of the phone booths. And and I'm loud right now, but I'm at home by myself, so it's okay.
Right.
But after that, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like a kid that had been reprimanded. And he was very sweet about it. It wasn't, but I was like, oh my gosh. And I was beating myself up for about a day and a half. And then I had the realization, I am loud, I'm colorful, I'm innovative, I'm energetic, I'm enthusiastic, I'm all these things. And that's where I bring value. And so it's not that I was wrong or I was doing something wrong there. It just wasn't the right place for me.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to stop and think about the culture of where we're working and the kinds of things that the organization embraces, because then that represents where we can be ourselves. So I absolutely need to work with people who are okay with me coloring outside the lines. 100%.
Yes.
And I haven't always done that. And I tell you what, I've been miserable in those positions because I couldn't be my authentic self.
Absolutely. That's why we get along so well.
I know. I love you so much. So, Shannon, one of the things that you talked about is being authentically you and embracing that. And something else you talked about is being a lesbian woman in the federal government and just in the world. And I really do want to talk about that, because I think we all have things that are challenging or can be challenging, but I'm glad we live in the time we live in now, where we are embracing diversity of all kinds more, but I still believe we have such a long ways to go. And so, I would love to hear more about your journey. And I love the fact that you are so open and embrace it and really help destigmatize it and say, I am an awesome person, all of me. And that, as a supporter of you, I'm like, yes, I think that's fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about how you got from, our generation didn't really talk about it a lot. My children's generation, I was 17 and 20-year-old, totally different story, but our generation didn't. And I was lucky. I worked at Walt Disney World in the entertainment department. And so I was exposed to the gay community from like 16 on, and it was very open and everybody talked about it. And it was really a non-issue. But that's because I was in this little bubble. And then I got out in the world and I was like, what's the deal? Why are you guys, what's up? So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was going to say, first, I want to give you a hug. It's very sweet of you. And second, how long do we have?
I know, right?
No, I'm teasing. So short in a nutshell, it took me about 30 years to truly accept myself, because being a teacher in Oklahoma was not a very welcoming place for, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, any of the letters. It was not a very welcoming place, especially in the school district.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was teaching, it fell under moral turpitude in my contract if they found out that I was gay. And so for those that don't know what moral turpitude is, it's basically going against traditional values in the home or just in society in general. And so, being young, first time teacher and all of that, I had a whole lie about my life. When my students would ask, I would have a picture. It was an old one, but I had a picture, showed me with a guy. So, and I was dating someone outside of work. And so it was one of those things where I was always on my toes and always guarded. So I couldn't be my authentic self at work unless I found someone else that was like me. But we had to be very careful about what we talked about and how we acted and what we wore and, you name it. So it was basically a facade. Part of who I really was in there. but really couldn't come out. And I wasn't comfortable either coming out. So I was very much in the closet until my last year of teaching. And when I left that to go back to college for my master's degree, and then eventually into the federal government, I was in my first Pride Parade. Well, that's when a television camera came right up to our float.
Oh,
and my face was right there. And I was
that's
like,
one way to be outed.
and so I remember it was like Fox 25 or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And of course, my wife now was like, ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, no, it's not funny, because I didn't know. I mean, I was so naive. I didn't know if they could hold my retirement, the money that I was trying to cash out. I had no idea. Right, I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Oh my God. Who's going to see? What are they going to think? Oh my, just all these thoughts went through my head. So, but that's when I think I first was like, okay, well, guess what? It's out there now.
Right.
Here I am in a toga on the Isle of Lesbos float. Here I am, world.
I love it. All right, but you had to have known that participating in that parade was outing you to a certain extent. I mean, you were publicly saying, this is who I am.
I did. And you are absolutely correct. And so it was the first time that I think I was brave enough to put myself out there.
Right.
And I knew that I was surrounded by people that were friendlies. And so I like to say family, the FR instead of family, but family, friends that are like family. And so I was surrounded by people that I knew I had support from. And at that point, I thought, you know what? It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I had so much fun. And it warmed my heart to see so many families in the audience, and to see the crowd and hear people cheering for us and yelling at us, yelling good things at us, not bad things.
Yes.
And just the excitement and the energy in the air and the love from the entire community. I mean, it was amazing. And so I think that's really what started opening my eyes to, okay, let me crack that closet door open, because there's a whole nother world out there that I need to explore. And so when my wife and I first started dating, I mean, she was out. Everybody knew her. Everybody knew her. She managed the Lesbian bar in Oklahoma City. We couldn't go anywhere without people knowing her. And so it was quite opposite of me. I was trying to hide over in the corner, and I'm like, do you have to wear a do-rag when we go to the Oklahoma State Fair? Really? My students may see you. They're going to know. And she's like, I'm not changing, and I'm not going back in the closet for anyone. And I thought, well, good for you. That's awesome that you are that comfortable with yourself. And so I think seeing her and watching how she held herself and knowing her story, really helped me to embrace myself and start to kind of lean into it and kind of test the waters a little bit with who I told.
Right.
And because I didn't officially come out to my family until she and I started dating. So that was after I was 30 years old.
Right.
And I think I did that in a Christmas card. She'll remind me all the time and say, yeah, before we made our trip down there, you said, oh, by the way. I was like, yeah, I did do that, didn't I? I was pretty chicken back then.
Well,
it was terrifying.
Absolutely. And
it's terrifying.
It's a different environment now, but I still think it's terrifying. And my children have stories of friends who had very bad outcomes, when things when they came out. And so we've come a good distance. We have a really big distance to go. So I can understand why you would be scared.
Yeah, we did.
How did your family react?
Well, and so that's the interesting part is so the Christmas cards went out ahead of our trip.
Yeah.
And the reason they did is I wanted to give my family plenty of time to say, don't come.
Yeah.
So it gave them kind of an out to let me know before we traveled there if they were not going to be, okay.
Right.
And so I will say that one of the things I said to my family, that because it was like crickets. You could have heard crickets. There was like nothing, no conversation, nothing.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of that uneasy feeling and not knowing when we walked in the door, you know, what was going to be said, if people were even going to, you know, be nice to her, if they were going to speak. I mean, I had no idea.
Right.
And so there was a lot of, not that I encourage drinking, but there was a lot of drinking that went on that weekend because I was terrified. And I was like, and I am not usually a drinker. So yeah, I mean, I think that had we had the conversation and just talked about it and nobody taking the blame, so to speak, because, and I say that because my parents, at one point, we were sitting around dinner table, and I remember them asking me, you know, is it something that we did?
No.
And I said, no, it's not.
No.
And I said, and if I could change, I would, because it would be a much easier life.
You know. Yeah.
And I said, do you really think that? And of course, there was a lot of tears and, you know, and trying to make them understand something I didn't even understand.
Of course.
I was just like, I mean, it would be easier to be straight. I would be miserable, but it would be an easier life.
Yeah.
And I said, do you think I enjoy being the butt of jokes and knowing that there's some people that wish that I wasn't even here?
Right.
And that would just as soon, you know, snuff out my life
right
today as to see me, you know, walk down the street. And so it's, yeah, I mean, it was really tough. And I mean, it still is, because I know that there's some people, you know, still in my family, it's not talked about with some of my relatives. And, you know, and then there's some that treat, you know, my wife like she's part of the family.
That's good.
Yeah. And so I'll say my family just didn't really talk about it. So it was kind of, and it's still kind of awkward at times, but I don't go home that often anymore.
Right.
I mean, I love my family. I just don't go home that often anymore. It's just, you know, I have a life out here and I love to go visit, but it's like, if I feel like we're both not looked at as a married couple,
right,
it's just different.
Thinking about this from a Queens of Moxie perspective, you know, what would you say to women to be authentic, to live their lives in an authentic manner, not just based in their sexuality, but also anything? Like, what are the things that you would say?
I think it goes back to what you mentioned earlier when you were talking about what makes you light up. I think for me, it was being my authentic self meant really figuring out, what are my values? That was one. And what is it that makes me happy, truly happy? And also looking at the traits that I have that are not so flattering, and accepting and knowing that they're just part of who I am. And there's a lot of onion layers, you know, to who each of us are as human beings. And so understanding that and accepting that, and maybe not liking it, but knowing that that's just part of who I am. It's not all of who I am. It's just a part of who I am. And so I would say to people, anyone out in the audience, is think about who you are at your core. What makes you you? Because every one of us is unique. What is it that makes you unique? And it's not a matter of, are you comfortable sharing that with everyone? It's more of a question of, why aren't you sharing that with everyone? And maybe everyone is a little too broad. Start with your inner circle first, if you want to test that out and see, because not everybody can handle all of who you might be.
That's true.
And I say that from experience.
I'm a lot. I get it.
I mean, you know, like you were saying, you're loud, you're bold, you're colorful. Hey, I'm right there with you.
I know, you're my soul sister.
So some people are like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just in embracing the good with the not so good, and understanding that maybe that not so good we have to mitigate sometimes and be aware of. So really looking at, you know, self-awareness and that, and how you can be who you are and be okay with that. And not apologizing for who you are.
Yeah.
You know, we're each different people. Nobody's perfect. We're all flawed. And to me, being flawed, what is the phrase? The imperfectly perfect?
Yes.
Perfectly imperfect. It's one of them. But yeah, I mean, it's basically when you have flaws. And that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you special. And thank goodness we are, because if we were all just alike, how boring would that be?
Oh, yeah. Well, if it were people like you and I, it would be really loud.
All the time. We'd be
All
like,
the time.
okay. So I think, you know, it's really that is just embracing all of ourselves and being okay with that.
Yeah.
And knowing that you're not alone when you say, am I good enough? Or, well, that's not who I'm really not that, meaning imposter syndrome.
Right.
I've struggled with it. I think you and I have had conversations about that, and it's real, but understanding that when we each go through this as, you know, Queens of Moxie, it's part of our journey.
Yeah.
It's part of our journey is figuring out what really makes up who we are. And as we get older, I think it sometimes reveals itself in different ways. And for me, I think going through the leadership coaching program, there was a lot of layers that got peeled back during that program. And whew, it is not an easy process. And sometimes you find triggers, sometimes you find traumas that are painful. And sometimes you find those blissful moments that you've forgotten about as you're peeling back those layers. And so I think that that's all part of us finding who we really are as authentic human beings, is really peeling back our own onion. And it's going to be different for everyone. Right.
Yeah, no, I so many nuggets of wisdom in this. I you know, it's gonna be fun writing the show notes, trying to like capture it all. But Shannon, I am so delighted and so pleased that you were able to find some time to sit down and talk with us today. I mean, it is always such a joy, an absolute joy and pleasure to speak with you. And every time I walk away going, wow, that was really awesome. That was really great.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. And I'm sure the listeners are feeling the same way in listening to you. So thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us on the Queens of Moxie podcast. Each week we come to you with amazing women who have overcome obstacles, who are living their best life and reclaiming their moxie. We hope to see you next week.